All right, welcome to another deep dive. We are diving deep today into some Daoist philosophy, looking at chapter 24 of the Dao De Jing.
Okay.
This is a text that I know you love. It's one that I've been spending more and more time with recently.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. Some of the stuff in this chapter is a little bit counterintuitive, I think, especially for those of us who were raised in the West with kind of a Western mindset. Mm-hmm. But it's full of, I think, really applicable wisdom for our modern lives.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we're going to unpack this chapter a little bit. We're going to explore some of the ways in which it maybe clashes with some of our Western ways of thinking.
Okay.
And then we're going to see how it surprisingly applies to your modern life.
Yeah.
Whether you're leading a team, striving for success, or just trying to find some peace.
Yeah.
In this crazy world.
In a crazy world.
We've got another layer to this deep dive today, which is we're going to be using a lecture by Dao Master Chu Meng Fu.
Oh, wonderful.
To help illuminate some of the trickier points.
He is fantastic.
I think you're really going to enjoy this one.
Yeah.
So get ready for some aha moments.
I love it. All right, let's go.
So what I find really fascinating about chapter 24 is that it critiques behaviors that a lot of people consider to be very important for success in the modern world.
Totally.
Things like ambition, self-promotion, striving to stand out, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Laozi is presenting kind of a different path.
Yeah.
One that emphasizes humility, naturalness, and aligning oneself with the Tao.
Yeah.
Which is the underlying principle of the universe.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of this is very counterintuitive, right? Because, like you're saying, we live in a world where you have to put yourself out there. You have to be ambitious. You have to set these high goals.
You gotta hustle.
Yeah, you gotta hustle. But this is almost the opposite.
Right.
Saying, well, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a way where you don't have to kind of force things so much.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to be more in alignment with the flow of life, so to speak.
Yeah. And so, chapter 24, it starts off with these kind of really interesting metaphors. It talks about tiptoeing, stretching legs, leftover food, even a tumor. They all kind of illustrate this point about the pitfalls of ego-driven behavior.
Yeah.
So what is Laozi getting at with these metaphors?
Well, I think, what he's saying is that when we try to force ourselves into positions of superiority or control, it ultimately doesn't work.
Okay.
So, for example, he says, he who stands on his tiptoes does not stand firm. He who stretches his legs does not walk easily. Right? So it's like if you try to stand on your tiptoes to make yourself look taller, you're not really gaining anything. You're actually putting yourself in a more precarious position.
Right. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race, in a way.
Absolutely.
But it does seem to clash with a lot of what we're told about ambition and achievement in the West.
Right.
Like dream big, set goals, push yourself, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's where this Daoist philosophy can be a little bit challenging. Because it's not saying don't be ambitious, don't set goals. It's saying be mindful of how you're going about it. Right? Don't try to force things.
Okay.
Don't try to control everything.
So it's not about denying potential, but it's about aligning your actions with...
Aligning your actions with the Tao.
With the Tao.
With the natural flow of life. It's like if you think about a river, the river flows to the ocean. It doesn't try to force its way there. It follows the natural contours of the land, It's a kind of wu way.
Wu way.
Effortless action.
Effortless action. Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So, to help us understand this chapter even better, I want to bring in some insights from Dao Master Chu Meng Fu.
Oh, excellent.
His lecture on chapter 24 really brings these concepts to life and uses a lot of examples that I think are very relatable. So what were some of the things that stood out to you from his lecture? Well, I think one of the things that stood out to me the most was his example of the bully.
Oh, yeah, the bully.
Who stands rigidly upright, thinking that this makes him powerful. But actually, this rigid posture makes him vulnerable.
Right. He's so focused on projecting this strength that it actually creates a weakness.
Exactly. And he connects this to a more universal experience, which is burnout. He says, if you stretch your leg too far out, you may not last that long because you need more energy. You are not going according to what your body could do.
Right. It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of us can relate to in our always on.
Absolutely.
24/7 world.
Muscle culture, yeah.
Yeah. So finding that balance between striving and resting knowing your limits.
Yes.
It's a very different way of thinking about achievement.
It is. It is. And this brings us to another key point from chapter 24, which is the dangers of self-assertion.
Okay.
Right. Laozi says, "He who displays himself does not shine. He who asserts his own views is not distinguished."
So it's not just the physical exertion, but it's also how you present yourself.
Exactly.
How you present your ideas.
Yes.
It's constantly trying to prove yourself, trying to force your opinions. It can actually backfire.
It can backfire because, as Chu-Ming Fu says, when you're always insisting on your own viewpoint, you're not really listening. You're not really questioning. And so you're blocking understanding.
It's not about being right or wrong. It's about understanding perspective.
Exactly.
It's really hard to do that.
It is.
Especially in today's world. So, Tao Master Chu-Ming Fu, how does he suggest that we approach personal growth and improvement if we're not supposed to be, constantly asserting ourselves or striving for recognition?
Well, he uses this great example of a photographer who, instead of seeking praise or comparing himself to others, he focuses on making small daily improvements in his craft.
Okay.
So it's about that consistent, effort, that consistent practice.
It's like that idea of the compound effect. Like small little things you do consistently lead to big results.
Exactly.
Over time. But how does that fit in with our Western ideas about individual heroism and, achieving greatness through sheer force of will?
Well, that's where the contrast between Taoism and Western philosophy becomes really interesting, because what chapter 24 is saying and what Chu-Ming Fu is saying is that true influence often comes from aligning with a greater force. It comes from working in harmony with the natural order of things. It doesn't come from forcing outcomes.
Right. So we have this ancient Daoist wisdom that seems to be challenging some pretty fundamental Western ideas.
Yeah.
How does Taoism stack up against some of the heavy hitters of Western philosophy? Folks like Aristotle, Nietzsche, even the Stoics.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's what we're going to dive into next.
All right. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, for example, Aristotelian virtue ethics emphasizes striving for excellence and cultivating virtues like courage and wisdom.
Okay.
While that shares some similarities with the Taoism in terms of self-cultivation, it's more about actively shaping oneself to reach a defined ideal.
So Aristotle is about taking action to become the best version of yourself, while Taoism is more about aligning with the natural flow and letting things unfold.
Exactly.
This is getting really interesting.
It is.
I can't wait to hear more about how Taoism compares with these other Western philosophies.
Well, stay tuned for part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into chapter 24 of the Dao De Jing.
Yeah, this is really fascinating stuff.
We've been exploring how this ancient wisdom kind of challenges our modern notions of success and achievement.
Yeah.
And encouraging us to shift from this self-promotion and striving to humility and alignment with the Dao.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how these seemingly simple concepts from Laozi and then these insights from Tao Master Chu-Ming Fu can be so profound and applicable to our lives today.
Yeah.
So let's pick up where we left off, comparing Taoism to other big thinkers in Western philosophy.
All right, let's dive in. So we were just talking about Aristotle and his emphasis on striving for excellence.
Oh.
Right. And then you have someone like Nietzsche who championed the Übermensch, the individual who transcends conventional morality and creates their own values. And so this idea of self-overcoming and will to power is fundamentally different from the Taoist emphasis on humility and non-striving.
So Nietzsche is all about pushing boundaries and asserting your will,
while
Laozi is saying let go of the ego and align with something larger than yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, what about Stoicism? It seems like there might be some similarities there.
Yeah.
With, the focus on controlling your emotions and accepting what you can't change.
Yeah, for sure. Stoicism can seem closer to Taoism at first glance.
Yeah.
But Stoicism is still about using reason and discipline to achieve inner peace.
Okay.
While Taoism is about finding harmony with the natural flow of the universe.
So Stoicism is about actively shaping your inner world, while Taoism is about aligning with the outer world and letting go of control.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
These different philosophical approaches are so fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible how each one offers a unique perspective on how to live a good life. But let's maybe shift gears a bit and see how this Taoist philosophy, particularly the wisdom in chapter 24, can be applied to our modern lives.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's do it. One area that comes to mind immediately for me is the modern workplace.
Oh, absolutely.
Feels like we're constantly bombarded with messages about climbing the corporate ladder, standing out from the crowd, building your personal brand.
Totally.
All that kind of stuff. So how does this Daoist philosophy of humility and non-striving fit into that kind of environment?
Well, it's definitely a tricky landscape to navigate, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, remember that metaphor about tiptoeing? Trying to force our way up the ladder, constantly seeking recognition, that can actually lead to instability.
Okay.
And burnout.
Right.
So instead of focusing on outward appearances and self-promotion, Taoism would suggest focusing on doing good work and letting your actions speak for themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not about being passive. It's about finding that natural flow in your work.
Exactly.
It reminds me of something Chu Fu said in his lecture. He talked about how people often claim credit for success, but that creates imbalance.
Yeah.
And instead, he suggests focusing on the process, continually improving, rather than taking ownership of outcomes.
Yeah, it's about detaching from the need for recognition and focusing on the work itself.
Okay.
And allowing success to emerge naturally from those efforts.
So it's almost like a paradox. By letting go of the need to stand out, you might actually make a more significant impact.
Right.
Interesting.
Think about leaders who embody this principle. They don't need to boast or assert their authority. Their influence comes from their actions, their integrity, their commitment to serving others.
This is what's called quiet leadership.
Yeah, quiet leadership, and it's very deeply rooted in Daoist principles.
Okay, so it sounds like it's about shifting our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment.
I think so, yeah.
But beyond the workplace, how else can we apply these Daoist principles in our modern lives? What other areas come to mind?
Well, I think another area where Chapter 24's wisdom really shines is in our relationship with material possessions and consumerism.
Okay.
Laozi talks about the emptiness of excess food and superfluous acts, and this feels especially relevant in today's society where we're constantly being told to buy more, have more, be more.
So how can we as modern consumers, constantly bombarded with advertising and messages of more is better, how can we apply Laozi's wisdom to kind of navigate this?
Well, I think it invites us to question the source of our desires, right? Are we seeking fulfillment through material possessions, or are we chasing after something deeper? Laozi suggests that true contentment comes from aligning with the Tao, not from accumulating things.
This isn't about denying ourselves nice things. It's about recognizing that true wealth lies not in what we own, but in our inner state of being.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding freedom from that constant pursuit of more and embracing a sense of contentment with what we have.
This makes me think about the minimalist movement, which encourages people to simplify their lives and focus on what truly matters.
Yeah.
There's a definite connection to Daoist philosophy there.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about how Chapter 24 can be applied in the workplace and even to consumerism.
Yeah.
But what about our relationships with other people? How does this Daoist philosophy inform how we interact with our loved ones, our friends, and our families?
That's such an important question. And I think Laozi's wisdom has a lot to offer in this realm. Remember his emphasis on humility and letting go of self-assertion?
Yeah.
Well, that can be incredibly powerful in our relationships.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to dominate conversations or assert our opinions or prove ourselves right, we can practice listening, understanding, and seeking harmony.
That sounds really challenging, though, especially when conflicts arise.
Oh, for sure.
It's so easy to get caught up in being right and trying to win an argument. But it sounds like Taoism offers a different path. One that leads to greater understanding and connection.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that forcing our viewpoints on others will likely lead to resistance and disharmony. So instead, we can approach our relationships with a sense of openness, a willingness to see things from different perspectives, and a genuine desire to connect on a deeper level.
This is making me think about my own relationships and how I can apply these principles.
Yeah.
I can definitely see how practicing humility and letting go of the need to be right could lead to more fulfilling and harmonious connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about our relationships with others. Laozi also warns against the dangers of self-conceit and vaunting oneself. So constantly comparing ourselves to others or seeking praise or putting ourselves on a pedestal only creates a sense of instability and disharmony.
It takes us further away from the natural flow of the Tao.
Exactly.
So this goes back to the idea of letting go of the ego. But how do we cultivate this sense of humility and inner peace in a world that's so focused on self-promotion and achievement?
It starts with self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing the ways in which our ego is driving our actions, our thoughts, our desires. And then from there, it's about making a conscious effort to shift our mindset and align ourselves with this more natural, harmonious way of being.
It's a process, a journey of self-cultivation.
Exactly.
It's about finding that quiet space within ourselves, that connection to the Tao, even amidst the chaos of modern life.
Yeah, and it's not always easy, you know?
No, it's not.
It takes conscious effort to shift our mindset and align ourselves with this more natural, harmonious way of being, you know? We're living in a world that seems to be moving faster and faster with more pressure to achieve, to consume, to stand out. But it's about finding that balance, recognizing when we're falling into that trap of self-promotion or striving for external validation. It's about pausing, taking a breath, and remembering the wisdom of Laozi and the insights of Chu Fu. It's a journey, not a destination. And it's one that's, I think, well worth taking.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring the wisdom of Chapter 24 and its relevance in our modern lives, from our careers to our relationships and even our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. Join us in Part 3, where we'll wrap up our exploration of Daoist philosophy and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Chapter 24 of the Dao De Jing. We've been talking about how humility and naturalness can lead to a really fulfilling life.
Yeah. We've really seen how these ancient principles and these insights from Tao Master Chu Fu can challenge our modern ideas about success and achievement, and even our relationships with ourselves.
It's been an amazing journey. So as we wrap things up, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
You know, I think one of the most important is the power of humility. Laozi really reminds us that trying to force our way to the top or trying to stand out, assert dominance, that it can lead to imbalance and instability.
And that true strength, true influence comes from aligning with the Tao, letting go of that ego, that need for control, that need for recognition.
Yes, that effortless action. It's finding our natural rhythm and flow rather than constantly striving and pushing. It's a different way of approaching life, one that's more in tune with how things actually work.
Exactly.
I love that.
And that brings us to another key takeaway, I think, which is the importance of self-awareness. Recognizing when we are falling into those traps of ego-driven behavior, self-promotion, boasting, comparing ourselves to others.
Right.
That's crucial for aligning with the Tao.
It's funny, the example that you brought up, the one from Chu Fu, about the photographer who's focusing on daily improvement, not for the praise or the recognition, but just for the love of the craft. That one's really sticking with me.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's about focusing on our own growth and improvement, not for external validation, but just for the pure joy of mastery and self-cultivation.
It's such a subtle shift in perspective, but it's a really profound one that leads to a much more sustainable and fulfilling way of being. So as we leave our listeners to kind of ponder these ideas, what's one final question inspired by Chapter 24 that they can reflect on?
Let's see. How about this? If true influence comes from aligning with the Tao, how can you apply this principle in your own life to achieve your goals without forcing things to happen?
Wow. That's a great question. It really challenges us to rethink how we approach success and fulfillment. Well, we hope this deep dive is giving you some new perspectives to explore on your own journey. Thanks for joining us.